Hey, what's going on, Brandon?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm sure glad you emailed me and got in contact. You doing all right today?
Oh yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks a lot
Good.
for asking, Jason.
Good, man. So you emailed me about uh a few things that have happened to you. Which one do you want to start with?
Um, we can start with the story about the goat man if you want.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and when I was about 12 years old, I was I live in Kentucky, and the county, I'm not going to mention what county it was here, if that's okay. But I was there with my family, and we usually visited um, almost every weekend as much as possible. My grandmother's, and she was, she was pretty elderly even then, and so this was back in the '80s. It was a different time. I don't know if a lot of your viewers um, understand this, but here in Kentucky, in those days, people would leave their doors unlocked and things, even if they were gone. A lot of
Oh yeah.
times,
I remember those
yeah,
days.
sure. And so anyway, my mother and father wanted me to some family friends and let them know that they were in for the weekend because my grandmother didn't have a telephone. So I rode my bicycle down there, and it was probably just a little under a mile, something like that, from her house. And so I got down there to the house, and I laid my bicycle off to the side of this house. And I want to mention one little aspect here was that um, I think when we were speaking before the show here, um, this house sits catacornered to two roads, and I'll get into that later. What the significance of that is in the paranormal realm, which I found out later on in life. So, just to kind of paint a picture, this is older, probably built in the late 20s, early 30s. This house. And so I go and knock on the front door, and I stand there for a few, and no one came to the door. Well, being a kid, I thought, well, my parents wouldn't have sent me down to these people's home had there not been anybody there. And so what I did was I walked around to the side of the house, and there was a side door with a metal storm door on there with a glass in it, and the inside door was ajar. It was open, you about 3/4 of the way or something, and I could kind of see in there. So, but it was daytime and the sun was out, so I had to cup my hands to look inside, and I put my face up to the glass and was looking in, and all of a sudden this thing comes out of nowhere. I mean, I don't know, if it was, well, for the sake of time, I'm not sure where it came from. It just came out of nowhere. And if you can picture, if you've seen the movie Lord of the Rings, this thing ran kind of like the golem with its hands down toward the floor, maybe kind of like ape like, but its hind legs were like a goat's, and its upper body was more human like. And it runs up, and it like it jumped down off of this counter. It like ran, I mean, it's just all over the place. And it ran up to the door and looked me right directly in the eye. And so,
Were you still cupping your hands looking through the
yeah,
door?
yeah,
Dang.
I couldn't even move. I mean, I was absolutely, mortified. I didn't know what to do. So,
Was it your
uh,
height? Just a
I,
short.
I would, I would say it was about my height, or maybe a touch taller. I'm not really sure. I wouldn't put it over probably 5.5 feet tall at most. And so, I mean, here I am looking at this thing directly in the eye, And as I described to you earlier, the thing had a hair on its face and everything, like a dog or a goat would have. Its head was like a goat's head, but the thing is, it had more human-like features. As the nose came down, it came to a cleft, and then its mouth looked more human-like. It didn't have lips per se, but it just, its mouth was shaped more like a human mouth, and its eyes were a yellow color with slits in them like a cat's eye, and it had ram-like horns that protruded out from the just behind the temple, I would say, and came down and curled towards the bottom of its chin. And it had this like really mangy hair that went around the back side of its head and on the sides. And I don't remember seeing ears on it. That was strange. I don't know why, but
Yeah, I was gonna actually ask you about the ears. Did it have more human kind of hair? That what did his like hair look like on the top of his head? Was it human or was it short,
it
like
it, it
curly?
was it was it had like a natural wave look to it, like kind of like a horse's hair that's on the neck of a horse. It was kind of like that. It wasn't real long, but it was just kind of, I guess, kind of like a lion's mane. I guess I would maybe even go that far to say. I mean, I'm trying to give a very descriptive picture of what I seen that day,
We
and
actually are. I'm getting a pretty good picture in my head.
I have seen some pictures online of things that people have drawn, some renderings and things, but I've never seen anything that was what I would say directly on par with it. There's a few Goatman images I've seen, like I want to say there's one that really stands out, but it's like really muscular and all this stuff. Well, this thing wasn't really that big. It was, it was smaller. It was like a,
it
well,
wasn't it wasn't ripped.
well, it was muscular in that sense, but it was small. Like it was
Yeah.
like a young adult. I mean, its body shape build was like someone that would say be lifting weights and they were 14 or 15. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I
It had like a
imagine if
washboard stomach.
okay, so it was kind of had a lot of muscles.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
imagine if this thing eventually looks you straight in the face through that glass door, you might not have gotten a look at its chest, but do you remember what its chest looked like?
No, no. I just
Yeah.
I caught a glimpse, of the upper body, but as it when it jumped up on this counter, I mean, with little effort. I mean, it's just like blam, it jumped up there, back down, and right at the door in my face. And I literally expected it to like smack the door, but it didn't do anything, didn't make a sound. I mean, like when it was at the door, but the terrifying part was it opened its mouth and it it had little tiny teeth like small like baby's teeth, but they were really sharp looking, but they were real small, not like fangs or nothing, but just little short baby teeth. And um, it's inside of its mouth. What I can remember was somewhat different colored than a human's mouth, kind of like a more of a purplish color, I want to say. And but what I do recall is I had this overwhelming feeling that, like it was hissing at me. It didn't scream. There was no like loud noises, just like it was hissing at me or something. And that's when, as I told you before the show, I had this overwhelming feeling like I was standing there for what seemed like 30 minutes or something. It just seemed forever. And I finally gathered myself together and got on my bicycle, and I was pedaling that thing like I was going to try to get to the moon on it. And
Real quick,
yeah,
do you remember it making a sound when it jumped on the counter?
no, I never heard the, like what you would expect to hear, the thump, like
And
of.
you
Sure.
left before it did. Did it?
Yes.
I got you. What
Yes.
happened after that?
Well, as I was riding back to my grandmother's, and I remember looking back over my shoulder, and if a person can imagine, and they've seen, I hate to use another cliche movie, but reference, but I looked back and it looked like the foliage of the trees and stuff was moving, like Predator or something. Something was moving the physical tree limbs and things above the roadway. And you got to imagine this is a gravel road I'm on as well. I mean, up uh, where I where my grandmother lived, it's very rural. There was no paved roads at the time there, and so I was on this gravel road, and it just felt like there was this ominous something behind me. I don't know if it was just out of fear or there was some sort of paranormal, um, some sort of paranormal element from that event that followed me. You know, uh, but to make this story a little shorter, when I got back to my grandmother's, I'd rode through a creek that normally I had to walk through with the bicycle. When I arrived there, they saw me, and I was like wailing and crying and beside myself in fear. And they came down to inspect me. I mean, they were like patting me all over, thinking maybe I'd been rattlesnake bit. And so once they saw that I hadn't been snake bit or anything, they were trying to get me to be able to talk to them, and I told them what I'd saw. And back in those days, families sort of just kind of tried to, you know, take the edge off of a serious matter by kind of making a joke of it, or whatever to, maybe make you doubt what you saw yourself or something, and it took them a long time to console me. And as I was telling you before, Jason, I had to, my whole life has been affected by that one event, actually, and it sent me down a path towards, some bad things, and then some, and towards some good things later on, obviously.
Well, I imagine a lot of times families just wouldn't know where to put it,
Sure.
and in their
Yes.
mind, there's just like, well, there's no way he could have saw that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean,
they obviously knew something had happened to you.
yeah,
Um,
it was, it was pretty life changing for me, but at that point, there wasn't counselors or someone I could go talk to about it, or,
right.
after the event, it was just, the family sort of blew it off and tried to make me feel okay about it. That was the best they could do.
Would you say, and I would imagine probably it is, but would you say that's the strangest thing that's ever happened to you?
I'm going to say yes. It,
That's
it, it would stand out as probably the number one event of my entire life, as far as seeing anything that is outside this realm of understanding that we have. Yeah.
later on when, I don't know, I guess I got on the internet pretty early around 94, but when the internet started getting big, did you try to research Goatman? Because there isn't a slew of information out there. There are a lot of accounts and some stories and stuff, but did you try to figure out anything about him? Did you find out any information or any
Well,
stories?
I didn't really hit the internet till around 2001. So I was sort of a late bloomer with the internet age. By the time I actually got into the internet and stuff, I'd sort of gotten away from that. I had tried to put that behind me. Obviously, my teenage years was pretty troubled from it. And so, as I got into my 20s and stuff, I sort of try to, put that back behind me. But I do recall, a little later on, say, I want to say around '05, '06 in there, I don't know if I just finally mustered up some actual uh, nerve to actually get into looking about it, and studying about what it may have been. And I kept running across this one name, and it was Azazel.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're familiar with that name.
Yes.
Um, and for those that may not know, that was a demon in Old Testament. Uh,
That was a fallen angel, right? It's the terminology there gets weird, but from what I remember, he was described as a fallen angel, right?
yeah, Azazel was supposed to be one of the fallen ones at Mount Hermon.
Yes, and he
And
was yeah, he was responsible. They Do you remember what he was responsible for teaching mankind? I think I remember running across them. I'm talking about they list some angels, I think in Enoch.
sure, yeah, the book of Enoch explains the different, uh, uh, for the lack of it, the different jobs or tasks that they were, you know, sort of assigned for themselves. Like one was over writing and the arts and teaching man to learn the ways of sword making and
Right.
making armament, that sort of things. As far as Azazel, I really can't tell you. It's been a long time since I used to research the demonology thing, but it's been so long, and uh, I just really got away from all that. I actually got to meet, and his name slips my mind all of a sudden. John Zaffis. Yeah, I met
Oh,
him.
he had a TV show,
Yeah, yeah, I actually got to meet John Zaffis.
and he had a museum
Hmm.
of really evil, like you could say, artifacts. Yeah, that's an interesting guy.
Yeah, he was a real generous and friendly guy. A lot more friendly than I actually expected. Um,
Real quick, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates.
there we go.
And
Okay,
just before I forget, because I'll lose this point I wanted to make, that's
sure,
fascinating to me because, I believe a lot of these, especially the rarer cryptids that people see, if you want to call it Goatman a cryptid, is definitely kind of more on the spiritual end as far as I can tell. But
for
that's
sure.
what I think they could shapeshift. The angels could come down and you might not could tell them from a human. And I believe they shapeshift and of course we won't really know, but that could have been a fallen angel that you saw. And
Yeah,
it was
I mean,
taking that
absolutely.
is that the feeling you get?
I don't really feel like that incident was one of those moments where I could tell you with any kind of assurance, or even
Yeah.
in the realm that's what I saw. I feel like it was some sort of entity that was able to come through the veil,
Well,
the veil between this world and the next. But
I guess at that
what?
point, it's good to call it just demonic because
Yeah,
that's a
yeah. I mean,
broader term because it sounds like it followed you. It may have. changed form and been pretty much invisible and was chasing you, and a strong entity like that, you can feel it coming after you. That's
Well,
terrifying to be 12 years old, dude.
oh
That's
yeah, yeah, definitely. And another facet to that um, of Appalachia. I mean, that's what the area of Kentucky is Appalachia. Um, is known for what they call like Appalachian witchcraft. It's they never actually called it that, but that's what I would consider it as, and I think I've actually seen it termed as that by some other researchers. And my grandmother was into, like, for instance, with, I hate to use this gruesome term, but she would take it like a black chicken and rip it in half and take the blood from that chicken. I don't know what she said. I'm sure there was some sort of thing she would say, and she would like rub the blood on like I don't know if many of your viewers have heard this term, shingles. She had shingles, and so I'd heard them talking about it, her and some of my other family, and she had rubbed the black rooster's blood on her shingles to get rid of them.
if people don't know, shingles is it's slightly, I just know a tad bit about it. It's slightly related to like chicken pox or something, and it's a
Yes,
skin ailment that burns
it's from
really
it's an
bad.
actual nerve, like a nerve disorder that stems from having chicken pox over time.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Quick, a little bit quicker explanation, I guess. But
Yeah.
and she'd had other ailments and things, and I mean, I know a lot of people have heard of these herbalist doctors and things like that. Well, it was sort of in line with that kind of thing, but they sort of took it to the darker side. I can't tell you why. I don't know if it come from the old land over in Ireland and Scotland.
That's what I wanted to
You know,
ask, if you knew what the origin
I
of that
really
was.
think that's where it came from. I
Yeah.
really do. I believe it was sort of a sort of a pagan thing that kind of just
Came from
through
overseas.
through the melting pot here in America. And my grandmother was born in 1906, and she passed away in, I think it was 96, I believe. No, 92. She died in 92. I apologize. Uh, but she had. I had this discussion with a psychologist later on in life. I had some anxiety issues and things, and so um, this I would, let's say, more of a counselor. This person was, but he was a Christian counselor, and he had this thing where we used what they call prayer regression. And so we went into prayer, and it I tell you, it was amazing what happened.
Wow. Okay, go on, because I've heard of regression, but I've
This
never
is where
heard
it's
of
going to get
prayer.
freaky for you. This is going to get real freaky for you.
Wow. Go ahead.
So my grandmother, with this little bit of a backstory of her having some dabblings in the dark arts, whatever you want to call it. So I went into this regression. I told this counselor about what I experienced, what I've just told you guys, and so um, we went into this prayer regression, and what happens? It's kind of like a meditation, only you're doing it in the security of faith, faith of God, and so I felt protected. I felt okay about it. At first I was skeptical, and so anyway, I went into it, and it's like you have a vivid dream. It's a livid, vivid dream where you're awake, but you're having this prayer, and he sort of just stops and lets me see what I can see, and what I saw was my grandmother cackling like a witch. And I mean, I tell you, it to this day gives me chills run all over my body. Now, my grandmother was never what you call, or what I considered to be evil toward me or the family or anything, but there was this, that's what I pictured. He said, I want you to take yourself back to that day. And what do you see? And I saw my grandmother cackling on the porch like a witch, and her face was even very vivid.
He was taking
Uh,
you back to the day that you saw that Goatman.
yes. And we were trying to, I guess, find a point of reference of where this all began and maybe why I actually had that experience.
Just to
And so
clarify, you were coming from your grandmother's house to another family member's house, right? And then you rode back to your
they
grandmother's
were
house.
a friend of the family that hadn't seen me since I was just a little kid.
Okay.
And so I rode down there because my grandmother didn't have a telephone
Okay.
to
So you
let them
were
know that we were in for the weekend. It was kind of to let them know in case they wanted to come down and visit with my mom and dad or whatever.
okay.
And you know, um, so I'm in this this prayer regression thing, and I picture her just cackling like a witch, and it was like I was looking directly at her, and I mean, my grandmother had these piercing emerald eyes. I mean, she could look like she was looking right through you. And
That's funny. My grandfather had eyes like that, so I know exactly
yeah,
what
it's
you're
like you
talking
don't
about.
see people with eyes that much like that nowadays. It's like something changed, and but she had those real piercing emerald color eyes, and but she was just cackling like a witch. I mean, it wasn't like a laugh, like a funny ha ha. It was more like, I just don't know. Um, and I'll tell you, there's some other strange occurrences. My father, uh, or my dad and mother came down there one time before this event here, and she was with another man, and I think he may have been into this kind of stuff as well. And they were in their like 70s, fooling around. And I don't know if it's some kind of like sex magic ritual, something of that nature. I mean, I don't want to go there.
Right. So there.
Apologize for even going down
No,
that realm,
but
but
yeah, I can. Yeah, I dig. I can understand that.
she actually was hiding in the house, and the doors were all locked up, and my dad thought maybe that she had had a stroke or something. So he sent one of my eldest brothers. I have two other brothers and a sister. Sent him through the window. It was the only thing they could find open to check on her. And when he came through the window, she jumped out from behind a refrigerator and like smacked him like nobody's ever saw. You know what I'm saying? And no one ever saw her with her hair down. Her hair was probably to her waist. Back then, you see older women nowadays. Usually, as they start to get older, a lot of women start cutting their hair shorter.
Yeah.
But her hair was down to her waist, and it was to be her age. She had very little gray and white hairs. And I mean, she even looked the part of a witch. I hate to say that about my own grandmother, bless her heart, rest in peace. But
Do you know why she was hiding behind the refrigerator and all of a sudden jumped out and smacked him?
because I think he caught them in the act of something they were doing in that home,
Oh, okay.
in her home, and so um, that's and she ran them off, and I mean she used all kinds of explicit language and stuff, but she was just into a lot of weird things. It's just stuff you don't really think about someone that's your grandmother and in her 70s doing those sort of things. So,
Well, her doing that does bring things around. You know what I'm saying? It
well, that sort of is what, that was the whole regression thing. I mean, it's like all this stuff started to pull together, and I was like, I believe my grandmother conjured something, and that was the reason they set me up, or like that was her chance to set me up. And I say this, I don't mean to sound the conspiracy theorist or something, or
oh,
completely,
I wear a
completely
tin hat.
crazier.
I wear a tinfoil
Yeah,
hat. So go ahead.
yeah. I don't really want to get crazier than it already is, but believe me, before this is over, it's going to be pretty wild. But what we came to the conclusion of, he said, I believe, once I come out of the regression and kind of got myself back together, because man, I started boohooing like a
Yeah,
big baby. I mean, it was like a relief, and it scared me all at the same time. Here I am, a
that's
grown.
good for you though, right?
Yeah,
That's a
it,
good
it
thing.
was. It was sort of a relief. On the other hand, it was kind of a nightmare. Like
Yeah,
having a nightmare. And so,
but it's better than keeping those all that inside.
sure, you can tell the story. Just like right now, I'm telling you guys what's happened. But when you're in that situation and you're comfortable and you're able to sort of kind of let it all loose, man, I mean, it really is sort of vindicating. It gives you, you don't feel like you're just a nut that you've seen something and no one wants to believe it, or whatever. I mean, this guy was a real, you know, he was a real genuinely nice person and a good person, I believe. And he never doubted me for a moment, because I mean, he saw the emotions and microaggressions that you can't hide those things.
I wouldn't mind
From
having a session with him. I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah, I
That was
mean, yeah,
good. Yeah.
it was like I said, it was refreshing but scary as hell at the same time.
What's
Pardon my
it's
language.
bad when it comes out, but I think ultimately it's a real good thing.
Oh, sure, sure. And so what I came to the conclusion of, and I found out more later on down the road, because a lot of things parents and family members won't tell you when you're younger, but when you get older, you find out all these strange family secrets and uh, strange things about other people you would have never thought of. And so there's a family that lives, um, I want to say a few miles away from where my grandmother lived. And so my grandmother had, this was a little after 92. And we went down there to their home. Me and my father went up there to stay for the weekend, and just to kind of, it was his home place, so it was good for him to get up there and get some fresh air, that sort of thing. But we went to these. It was a family friend's home, a few miles away, and we went in there, and back then, Terminator 2 had just came out, like been a few years, but it was, in my part of the country, it wasn't really. It had, it would just come out on like VHS and stuff. And I
Oh
remember,
yeah, I've seen all the term.
I was like, oh,
Yeah,
cool, they've got that tape. I was like, oh man, they have the VHS of Terminator.
I've seen all of them. I had to. I finally watched the last ones just to end up seeing what the end of the story was, and I remember reading the first Terminator book also too.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. No, that's fine. Um, but I remember walking into their home, and they lived in a really small home. And I guess in order to lay this out for you, uh, the road, um, it was sort of like a home that was on a bank. So there was like this sloping bank down into a garden they had their garden in this little, what we call a bottom, or some people just call a field. And so the house was really small. I mean, it's just a tiny, country home. So we go in, and I thought, man, this place seems a little bit kind of piled up. There's like bedroom furniture in the living room and stuff, and we're sitting there on the couch, me and Dad are, and so they're sitting there, and they're asking us how our trip was and how we got settled in, all that sort of thing, all the formalities. And my dad, out of the blue, brings this up, mentions something, because I think that maybe he had mentioned this to me beforehand at some point, and I just sort of, kind of stuck it in the back of my head about their house being haunted. And I was like, after the things I'd seen, I was like, yeah, no big deal. So we're sitting there, amongst their daughter's bedroom furniture, and they began to tell me this story. And now I will say these people were Christian people. And that's not to say that Christian people are infallible. I will say these people were probably some of the most salt of the earth people I've ever known. And so they begin to tell us, or well, the husband does. The wife doesn't really like to talk about it, like it really upset her. You could tell. And they were talking about the husband. I'm not going to mention names for the sake of their privacy. But the husband, he was talking about how he had plowed the field the summer before, and the old man that owned this house before they owned it had told them to not, and in specific terms and in a way you probably wanted to listen, but they had forgotten about it, to not plow down past a certain area of the garden. And they had forgotten this somehow, and he took the tractor and plowed the garden further down, and he went over this hole. And when I say a hole, I'm talking probably big enough a person could actually slide down inside of it. It's just this big, huge hole out on the edge of the creek bank, right next to the creek bank, and then there was their garden. And so he plowed over a little further and went over that. And in broad daylight, the wife saw what looked like a shadow come out of this hole onto the plows of the tractor. And he saw her reaction, thinking maybe there was a snake or something. And he looked back and he saw it as well. And then it went right back inside the hole. Well,
yeah, that's not good.
yeah. I mean, I at first, I was like, okay, they seen the shadow, And then I got a little more intrigued. It was like the husband got up one night after that, probably a week late, during the next week or something, because this was on a weekend. And he got up to get a drink of water, and he would always look out back at his tractor and plow and stuff to make sure anybody wasn't out there, sneaking around, maybe trying to steal a chicken or something. That's about all they had to steal back then. And so he looked out the window, and there was this thing hanging on the back window looking at him. He kind of looked down in the backyard, and when he did, he saw this thing looking back at him. And I can't give his description any justice. And seeing I wasn't there, I can't attest for how scary it was. But he said he got back in the bed and didn't sleep the rest of the night. And needless to say, he had several nights like that afterwards. Well, it sort of took a turn for the worse. They started hearing sounds come out of this hole when they'd be out there like hoeing the garden and the plants and stuff. And
Again, that's not good.
No, not good. It sounded like, and this was their explanation. Of course, in Kentucky, we're sort of backwoods. I'm sorry that my accent's terrible.
Oh man,
Pure.
I grew up in northern Alabama. You're not bothering me.
I have the pure Eastern Kentucky slang, so I
I
apologize.
and in fact, I almost think you have like a deep radio voice. But go ahead. So don't worry about that. Go ahead.
Okay, I appreciate that. But you know, they heard these sounds, and the husband, he got down there and was like listening, and it sounded, what he said, it sounded like pop tabs, like on a soda can or something popping. That's what he thought he heard. It was just like that kind of sound.
Like a bunch of them, or
Yeah. And then it was more like, he kind of thought that it was more like fire or something, the sound of fire or something. So I don't know. He just said that was
yeah,
how they explained it to me. So I
coming
can't
out of the
attest.
hole. Those
Yeah,
sounds are.
coming
Okay.
from the hole. Yes. So, I mean, here I am. I'm
That's
like,
really not good.
sure. I'm just a few years out from this Goatman incident, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I'm sitting there thinking I'm going to have to go back to my grandmother's and sleep in the house you know, that's just down the road from the damn Goatman. Apologies for my language there, but from the Goatman. And I'm going to have to think about this tonight, plus the Goatman and my creepy grandmother. So, um, yeah, I'm sitting there still sort of in disbelief. Okay, so that was until they told us that after that there started to be like scratching and clawing and sound almost like chains of stuff being drug across the floor upstairs of this
At
little.
at the place you were living.
No, the place, their home. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I forgot about snapping back to their place there.
That's okay.
So they're telling me about these sounds they'd been hearing upstairs, and their daughter was scared to death, and she was about, I want to say she was probably 5 years my junior. So I want to say I was about 14, 15 at that time, I guess. I may not be right on my numbers there, but I was about 14, I would say, somewhere in there anyway. So
So she was 9 or 10, probably.
yeah, she was. I'd say she's about 10. And so they had moved all of her furniture out of the upstairs, and they had limited space anyway, and had put a piece of plywood over the upstairs and boarded it up. And I'm sitting here looking directly at it, and then it all sort of hit me like, well, these people aren't just telling me some sort of spook story to kind of scare me. I mean, and the wife was crying. She done went crying by the time he got to the story about the sounds inside that hole outside. And so after that, that was about all they told me. And I asked Dad about it afterwards, and he was telling me that the old man that owned that home, he had apparently been into some of the same kind of junk my grandmother had been into. Only he was deeper into it. Like the whole, um, they called it the creek up there, where I'm from. It's very mountainous country, very mountainous people, but they called it the creek. Everyone lived on the creek there.
Yeah.
So everyone on that creek knew about this old guy, that he was into some dark, freaky stuff, but no one dared call him out on it either. He's a pretty tough cat. So, uh, so I had that to chew on that night when I got home.
So you
And
don't know
got,
whatever kind of became of them? Do you know if they had to like eventually move? I'm sure they moved anyway, but
no, they did not move actually.
uh,
Um, I told you they were Christian people, so I don't know if they had, maybe a preacher or minister come there and maybe try to bless their home. We never talked to them about it after that. It was too upsetting for them at the time. So we left that alone. Uh, but I will say the husband had a very terrible um, illness come upon him. It was sort of a malpractice thing at a doctor, and he'd worked in the coal mines his whole life. And so he suffered for quite a few years. And my dad was always and kind of grievous towards God because of it. He's like, I don't know how God could allow a man to suffer like that.
See, that's where a lot of people
True,
fall is
it
something
is.
happens and they blame God for it, and I just have to say you can't blame God for it. He's got a
No,
plan, and that's
and
sad. That's sad. I hate to hear that.
and the other thing of that is the man himself even said, he said, I know. He said, I suffer a lot, and everything, but I know God has a plan for me here. I'm here for a reason. And so, he actually had a better outlook about it. But my dad was pretty sympathetic toward him because he thought a lot of this guy. And like as I said, they were really good people. But he suffered, and I don't know if it was anything to do with all that kind of stuff that had happened there, but I haven't heard anything since. And of course, her being alone now, obviously, we're not going to jump into that conversation. So you've been having any of them spook problems?
Oh yeah, you don't want to do
You know,
that.
no, and it's just out of respect.
Well,
But
I remember from talking to you before, said you eventually kind of got into the paranormal and maybe a little bit of craft yourself.
yes,
I can identify that, and like I told you, my situation was kind of with nighttime stuff that happened to me, which eventually led me to researching a lot of stuff because I had to know what happened to me. So what kind of things do you want to say about
well,
that?
I got into uh, at first it was just more of a young moron out playing with fire, so to speak, kind of sitting out in the road, burning leaves and stuff, and trying to talk to the devil or something. At first, that's what it was. I was like challenging him, sort of. It was like, I was still in fear of this goat thing that I'd seen, and I was like trying to challenge him, and I thought it was more. It kind of went that direction, and then later on in my teenage years, I got into um, tarot cards, the Ouija board thing, which I don't put a lot of um, credit into the Ouija board movement as a lot of other people with faith might. I wouldn't suggest it for anyone because anytime you open yourself up to something, you're looking for trouble. I mean, and
I've
so
heard a lot of bad stories about it. I don't have any personal experiences with it, but my advice is to burn them. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, just
I
never get in it and never fool with them. But I haven't had any per se bad experiences with one myself. It just I had a bad feeling about it, as I told you before we started the show. There, that I had I have this empath sort of thing that was passed down from my mother's side, so I can pick up on bad things and bad vibes, and that sort of thing. And so being around them even gives me just the heebie-jeebies anymore. And so I would
real
definitely
quick,
recommend. Yeah.
I've been into. I got my first UFO book when I was 6. Anything about Bigfoot or Loch Ness
Mhm.
monster, I always had to know about. It was pretty much like a general kind of
Sure.
interest. And none of my family was like that. But later on, I found out that my grandmother was kind of like that. And
Really?
yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, now, because I would kind of hint to all my other, like on my mom's side of the family, nobody on my mom's side of the family was anything like that at all. Salt of the earth people, own
Sure.
plumbing companies and stuff. And, but on my dad's side, I kind of lost contact with them when I was like 8 because my grandmother died when she was 8,
Mm.
and later I found out later by talking to my aunt on that side, they've got some Masons in my family too, so
I see.
I know how
Yes.
that is.
Hmm. Yeah, that definitely has been a thing I've had to deal with in life. Um, I actually, uh, when we'll get back to where we was at there, but when I turned about 20 or so, I always thought that maybe, I looked around at people that were kind of like big in my town, uh, people that had made something of themselves, and most of them were Freemasons. And most people listening to this will probably find that if they look around their towns, or if it's if you live in a rural area, something like that, small town, you'll actually see that a lot of these people that are judges,
Yeah,
sheriffs, county attorneys, people that are in the
doctors,
bigger,
lawyers,
yes, bigger businesses, things like that. You'll see that they are Freemasons, and that's
police,
not conspiracy theory.
policemen.
Police, unfortunately, yes, that is an entire brotherhood all its own. And so, I thought, well, hey, man, it can't be that bad. All these guys are in it. So I actually went and put a petition in to a jeweler in my town that was a Freemason, and he was a very strange cat. Like, I knew him all like in high school and things like that, but he was sort of a weird individual. But he kind of asked me the questions. He was like, "Do you believe in a God?" He said, "A God, not God."
Not the
And
God.
I'm like, "Yeah, I believe in a God." And at that time, I wasn't a Christian, and I said, "Yes, I believe in a God." And he's like, "Okay." He said, "That's the main thing we need to know about." He's like, then he kind of got pushy, and he's like, "Have you ever thought?" He asked me where I work, and I told him, it was in a factory, and he kind of, it's kind of like in a factory. He's like, "What? You really want to? You really want to keep working in a factory?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, I don't really have a lot of options." He's like, "You ever thought about working for the county?" And I'm like, "Not really, but I'm open to options." And he's like, "Yeah, we'll talk about that later." And he's like, "But I'm gonna put your petition in." He said, "We'll get back to you." Well, come to find out, and I hope this other people out there understand this. These people do background checks on you, and when I say background checks, I mean they check your bank accounts. They have their ways of finding out about you, your bank account, your bill statements, things like that.
Yeah, they
Anything
have
if
a
you're,
whole network of people they could.
and it's insane. And you know, uh, this. I mean, we're going out on a tangent here, I know, but I just want to explain this to some people that may not know. Um, and this is not to put down anyone. I'm not putting down any group of people, anything like that. I just have my opinions as anyone else does, and I'm sure Jason does as well.
Oh yeah.
But the Mormon or the LDS has the birth records of every human being in America right now.
Yeah, they were behind, if I'm correct, ancestry.com also, right? They're real big
More than
into,
likely,
yeah, they're
yeah.
they're big into genealogy, and
Okay,
yeah, I know a lot about the Mormon religion. But go ahead.
okay. So you have that factor, and then you realize that the Mormons were started by a Freemason. And so there's your connection. I was like, oh, wow, it's like a whole thing opened up. I was like, so these guys have access probably through a Mormon database on every person. And they find your birth records, and then they can find out anything else they want to. And it was like a couple weeks. I had this old guy. He kept walking by my house every day. Never had seen him in my neighborhood. I live in town now, and this old guy would walk by my house every evening, almost like clockwork or something. And the only conclusion I came to is he was just checking out who I was keeping company with. And so it wasn't, I don't know, probably, I want to say 5 weeks, 6 weeks after that, after I'd put in a petition, a friend of mine I went to high school with, which had also became a Freemason. At that time, people would hang out in town here, and he pulled up and he said, "Hey, you got voted in." I was like, "What?" He's like, "You got voted into the lodge," and I'm like, "Oh." I was like, "Well, man, I changed heart on that. I really don't think I want to get into something that I don't really know about, because my mother had been married to one at one time, and her and my father, that was like their second marriage. Well, my mother's third, my father's second marriage, and so she'd been married to a Freemason, and she told me, she said, "Don't ever get into anything that you don't know what you're getting into," and that sort of stuck with me. And
That's
I
some
told him, I was like,
sage
man,
advice. That's some sage advice right there.
yeah, and that stuck with me. And so she was like, she told me that, and it kind of stuck in my head. And I was like, when you're in your early 20s, whatever, you know, things come and go. It's not a big deal. And I was like, nah, man, I don't think I want in. I was like, tell me something about it though. And he's like, well, let's say he was riding a motorcycle, had his girlfriend on the back, and he was like, well, let's say if me and you and my fiance was in a boat on the water, and the boat capsized, and you were drowning, and she was drowning, I would be obligated to save you before her.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I definitely, man, I'm not interested. And he's like, you sure, man? I'm like, yeah. I was like, you can tell them I'm not interested. No offense. I appreciate that they considered me. And he seemed pretty pissed that I had turned them down, and
Yeah.
since then, it seems in my town that a lot of people don't have a lot to do with me. Um, like, I can't get things done like other people, like I need to go have my vehicle worked on. Nobody seems to be able to, oh, I'm covered up in work, and they're standing there like petting their old dog or something.
That's scary. That is
They're like,
scary.
gee, buddy, and then you look down at their hand and there's the Masonic ring. And it's like, I got, I started getting pulled over by police here a lot after that.
Wow.
Um, yeah, there was just a lot of stuff happening. And so, I knew then, I was coined as the term that they call it is I was blackballed. And so
Just for
basically,
politely bowing
yes,
out of it.
yes. If you if you were to ever pursue it, it is a big mistake. I will tell you that from the beginning. So that was a lesson learned, and I apologize. We went out on that whole tangent about Freemasonry, but there's some witchy stuff going on in that, and
Yeah.
so
I think it has to do a lot of current events right now, but so it's
yeah,
yeah,
things that we're actually watching happen on television and
right.
the internet. So we won't get off into that tangent.
Yeah, that was still interesting because I've
Yeah,
not my father, but my father's father and his father and his father were all Masons, pretty high
sure.
up there or whatever. So I was
Yeah,
I had no idea, and she showed me pictures of his apron and stuff, and I
Mhm.
was kind of shocked.
Well, I mean, I know very little about a lot of things. I mean, that's my whole like mantra in life.
Yeah, I know a little bit about a lot of things.
That's me. Yeah, or maybe I messed up on that. I
Yeah,
apologize.
no, I
I
got
know
you.
a lot about a little and a little about a lot. There we go.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the whole tarot cards, all that sort of thing. I got into that and I dabbled around into that, and luckily that didn't really go anywhere. I didn't really go too far with it, but I was into the macabre stuff. I um, we used to. I actually had a real coffin in my home at one time, and so and that was only for Halloween type purposes, but everyone took it as like suddenly my house became sort of like a tourist attraction for teenagers and people in their early 20s. They're like, "Hey, man, show us that coffin in the basement." And I'm like, "All right, come on." And, I had it kind of decorated up in my basement and stuff, just to freak people
So
out. But
it almost became a urban legend,
it
you know.
turned into a big mess, man. That's what it really turned into. I
Oh
kid you not.
no.
Uh, People, I got picked on in school anyway, like earlier, back after that Goatman incident, because I was drawing all this spooky stuff. And where I live, if you get into that kind of thing, you're drawing things that people don't think is normal, like horses and trees and things. You're some kind of Satanist or something. So at that time, they started bullying me over that. And, I was sort of the emo teen, I guess you want to say, kind of listening to my music, just living in my own world. A lot of teenagers that way. But they picked on me, and I had to beat up a few bullies over that. And, uh, you know, my life has been um, filled pretty much with a lot of strange coincidences and things and that sort of stuff. I know I'm just rambling here. I'm trying to keep it together for you. um, I'll tell you, Jason, another thing that went along with that whole paranormal stuff I was into as a teenager. I seen some other things that I hate to even bring this subject up because it goes right back to the tinfoil hat thing.
Oh, good. Like, as I said,
But now I have had some people. Um, I've noticed that there's a lot more people now have openly looked at Bigfoot, right?
crypto seems really hot right now, especially like Dogman, and yeah, it's
So
bigger than ever. I would say.
I am a believer in Bigfoot, and the reason I can tell you I believe it is because I saw it. And another friend of mine, that as one of my childhood friends, we were best friends. We did everything together, and so this was about 90. I want to say 96, 95 or 96. And now you have your viewers, and I'm sure you remember that parents were a little more lenient with their kids back then. Like my parents trusted me to go out. I could stay out all night. They didn't mind because they knew I wasn't doing anything nefarious.
Well, see, mine were like be home before dark, and
Hmm.
I'm a single dad of 8-year-old daughter, and
Oh,
she's got to
wow.
be, yeah, she's got, she hadn't been allowed to even go out months as far as
Right.
playing with friends. So that's sad. We did grow up a lot different. We could,
Hmm.
like you said, those family members had their door open. You can't really do that anymore. If you were in a small town in the 80s, you could still pretty much leave your door open and not
Oh,
really
yeah.
have to
Yeah.
worry about it. And your kids could, like, I don't think mine let me stay out after dark, but we would basically go play out in the woods all day and
Sure.
ride motorcycles and stuff through the trails. But go ahead.
Yeah. That was sort of my, my same kind of childhood. I got to go out in the day, just, you know, gallivant through the woods doing whatever I wanted. But there was a strict work ethic that I had to live by. My father was he was pretty rough on me as far as the work ethic. Like, he worked me like a grown man. They didn't have me to just have a little bundle of joy. It was more of a gopher. Go here, go there, do what I tell you. So, I did a lot of hard work as a kid, and on the weekends, while other kids was watching cartoons, I was out working like a man, chopping wood and stacking it. So, anyway, back to my original point of this was, they let me stay out late at night, and me and my friend, I had a all terrain cycle, as they call it. It was a three wheeler. Where I live, that's what we call them, three wheelers.
Oh, I remember three wheelers.
Yeah, yeah, it was a Honda Big Red 200,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
and so he had one. It was a sport model. But anyway, we had this huge ice and snowstorm that year, and I don't know if anyone. Uh, I'm sure you're aware, if you're out at nighttime and there's a full moon or something, you can see for a long distance and see
When there's
shapes. And
when there's snow on the ground, it's like it
yeah,
like reflects
it's a
the.
contrast, a perfect contrast. And so we were out, and the lights on those vehicles weren't very bright, but like I said, the moonlight was out bright. And so there was this trail, and I'm not going to name it either, just for the simple fact of the name of it. Um,
Did it have an ominous name like the Devil's Trail or something like that?
oh, no, no, no,
Oh,
no!
okay,
It was
okay.
it was kind of silly, man. It makes it even worse country.
Yeah. Don't worry
Okay,
about it. Don't worry. I'm
I'll
sorry.
throw it out there anyway. It was called Watermelon Lane. That was the name of the place. Okay.
Okay, I got you.
And anyway, I'm not sure how it got the name, other than there was probably a lot of pregnancies that happened on the other side of this long trail that came out on another road. So that's the only thing I can think of. Excuse me. So anyway, we frequented that trail every day of our lives, basically. We would sit down there and smoke cigarettes and, chew tobacco, whatever we had at the time. And we were typical teenage boys. And but we were going down this trail that night, and I saw Bigfoot. Matter of fact, he saw it before I did. And there was the road sort of, or the trail sort of zigzagged down this hillside, and then it flattened out and went through a creek, and you would go up the other side, and it was like really steep and a lot of like ruts and things in it, to have to try to navigate around to get up the other side.
Was this at
Well,
night?
yeah. Hmm.
Okay, okay.
And so we were out there. It was probably, I don't know, 1:30, maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And, we was just out having fun. And he was like, he looked back at me, and I looked at him, and I'm like, what are we actually seeing here? And the thing is, it wasn't scary. It wasn't like, I've heard a lot of people and their Bigfoot sightings, man. It's always been fascinating to me. But at that time period, in the '90s, Bigfoot was not really a thing, man. Like, it was where I'm from. A lot of people never talked about it. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a thing. The only thing Bigfoot we knew about was the monster truck. It was like,
Yeah, but
that was
it was a thing. It's just that there wasn't a lot about it on the internet. There were no TV shows, and in your
right.
area, there wasn't a lot of like people telling. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, we had like 3 TV channels, on the rabbit ears. That was as good as it got. And so, I grew up without cable. Even my parents didn't get cable till I'd done moved out. So, but you know, here this thing was, and I can describe it to you perfectly, and the oddity about it. What struck me the most was the leg and its shoulder. That's the two things out of this whole event that really struck me. And I estimated, because of the height of this little cliff that went around the edge of this creek that this thing was walking, it never looked at us, never acknowledged that we were there, nothing. It was like, don't see me, basically. That was kind of like the feeling, and we were like, okay, we'll act like we didn't see it. Because we didn't want people to think we were crazy.
Yeah.
But it really didn't spook us that bad. It was just like, did we really just see this thing? And that was all there was to it.
Well,
But
what about the shoulders and legs stood
mm,
out?
yeah, that's the kicker. The thing I remember about it that was so strange, the shoulder was about the size of the bottom of a 5-gallon bucket. And I don't really know anyone walking around today that has a shoulder the size of a 5-gallon bucket, you know, and not then, especially. I mean, maybe roid use now might get someone close to that. I don't know.
So extremely broad shoulders.
Yes, yes. I couldn't see the face. I couldn't really even see its head. It was, you could tell it had a head, but it was forward and down. And what I recall being the strangest of its features was the length between its knee and its foot was shorter than someone's forearm. It was real short, and it had this really long upper legs.
So
And that
it's from the knee to the foot was
was,
shorter in proportion than a human's
oh
would
yeah,
be.
yeah. I mean, it was like really noticeably short. And what I saw, it when I got older and I've seen the Bigfoot shows and all these things, to me that makes sense why it walks the way it does. It doesn't really walk with a stoop because it's like a gorilla. It walks that way because its shin bone, or its lower leg bone, is shorter than other primates or humans or whatever. And so, it walked. It never threw its leg completely out as it walked. I mean, we saw it for a total of probably less than a minute. And I have this kind of like a photographic memory, especially since what happened as a kid when I was 12. So those things, it plays through my head every time I think of it, just like a movie. And I never ever saw it throw its foot directly out. It was always like a bouncing step with each step. It had a long stride, but it never had this, it never like threw that front leg, the leg going out straight out. It was more of just a bended step. And that's kind of why I think people has explained Bigfoot with having this kind of a hunched, you know, gait, I guess you would say. But that's the only time I've ever saw it. And after that, we had a lot of trees you know, had broken off and fell over our trails and things. And this one evening, we'd been cutting out the trail all day, and uh, my friend got the chainsaw hung in a tree that we was trying to cut in half that was on the trail, and so he had to go back to his house to get a wedge in order to get the chainsaw free. Well, I was sitting there waiting on him, and I had this, and that's the only time I ever had this feeling like something was watching me. I don't know if maybe I just had that, the thought of what we'd seen struck me, or it was actually something watching me. But
Well,
that was
I've had that happen, and since we saw nothing, I pretty much grew up in the woods when I was a kid in Alabama, northern Alabama.
Mhm.
And now that I think about it, I know something was watching us. It's weird. There's a there's kind of like a defense mechanism your soul has that tells you, hey, a predator's around or something.
Yeah, it's just an uneasy feeling, but you don't like for me, I didn't feel threatened, but it felt like, I probably didn't need to do anything stupid.
Right.
you know,
Well,
like
and you can even do that with humans. I can tell in a crowded room if somebody's looking at me.
yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. And I think people with that are empaths, and I think you mentioned that that's sort of something that runs in your family as well. I think that's a heightened sense that comes with that, and that actually may be even more uh, the reason why I pick up on all these paranormal events that I've actually experienced in life. Now, I told you before the show that I, had done paranormal research and stuff. That was back in about 2008 up to about 2010, and I have a lot of footage and things like that from it. And I used to have it on a channel of mine on YouTube that I ain't going to mention right now. Uh, but
Did you
I
want
took all.
to, real quick, while you brought that up, did you want to mention the other channel that you do have? If not, it's up to you. I just want to give you a
Um,
chance.
Man, I don't know in the times we're living in if it would
Okay,
even be beneficial to anyone. I mean,
no problem.
yeah, it's not really. I'm not about the recognition or anything. It's
Right.
but my thing is this. I guess the big takeaway is these events, these things that we think are borderline craziness, madness, whatever you'd like to call it, are probably more real than some of the things we see every day, like at least how we perceive them. See, um, through my research and stuff, um, my theories lead me to believe that the veil is like the air that we breathe. It's that thin. There's really that much between us and the other world on the other side of all this. And so, um, as we were talking earlier about paranormal with like entities and things people are seeing when they're doing these paranormal research shows and things like that. A lot of that stuff is hoaxy stuff. We made that, we talked about that as well. And not to be critical of the people with the shows, because hey, man, they're doing a hell of a lot better than I am in life. But
Well, it
it's
really does seem like the producer has to make sure something happens on every episode
yeah,
or there'd be
yeah, which
nothing.
is
Yeah.
utterly ridiculous. It's like
Yeah.
and as we were saying, like they would, what was that? And then they would cut to the commercial, and you were like on the edge of your seat, like, oh man, we're going to see something cool. Come back, and it's like a rat run across the board or something. And it's just. And then I'm not going to mention the name of the group, but the guy is a fashionista or a big fashion type, um, and he's well known still for his paranormal things. I actually met one of his team at a convention thing, and they were really nice guys and stuff. But the show was just kind of utter ridiculousness. I've seen one show that I'm well convinced they actually had a event happen that I think did do something to them. And I guess I'll
Well,
probably be giving it away if I mention it. So,
yeah,
okay,
you don't have to do that.
so
But what I wanted to ask you was, what was the strangest thing you guys saw when y'all went out investigating? Did y'all see anything?
um, yeah, I mean, I have, uh, geez, man, I've got a hard drive completely full of stuff.
Which
I've had
one
every,
kind of
I,
sticks out?
yeah, the one I do recall the most, there was a house in an area a few counties away from where I live, and I had been asked by another paranormal team to come assist on it because I did house blessings and um, would pray over people and that sort of thing. And so me and one of my team went with them on this paranormal uh, investigation.
Real quick, because I feel some responsibility here. I don't want to interrupt you, but
Sure,
would
sure.
you advise people to go do that?
Absolutely no.
Yeah,
I
I
do
wouldn't
not.
either. I'd like to just point that out that don't go poking at bears, folks.
It seems to be a lot of fun, and it does have that luster to it and that whole adrenaline thing to it. But I'm telling you, it will jack your life up, and it can very easily. And so I definitely do not recommend it. I know that sounds cliche, but
Yeah, but you can bring things home with you.
yes,
All
and
kinds.
you don't want that with your family,
Right.
no, at all. Um,
So anyway, you
so
guys were at this house.
yes, we arrived at this house. I want to say it was around 9 p.m. and there was this huge thunderstorm brewing, right? And so here comes another cliche movie moment for you. So you remember the movie Poltergeist, right?
Oh yeah.
So let's say was it Poltergeist 2 that the old man that had cancer that passed away shortly after filming it, the one that had like the cult or something. Remember the creepy old guy? He came up to the house,
Yes, he was
had the
wearing like
black
a
hat
black
on.
suit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I get out of the vehicle and we're carrying in our gear, and so I'm walking up the walkway to the home, and the lightning flashes, and I catch a glimpse of a man standing in the front yard, which that's about as good of a reference as I can give you as to what I seen that night.
Which
Standing
I'm going to say again, not good.
there. Yeah, I was like, well, this is going to
Not
be
good.
eventful. You
Right.
know, if I'd been a rookie, I'd probably got back in the vehicle and said, well, I'm going home now. So, we got in there, we got set up and everything. And the backstory to it is one of the kids' bedrooms was having activity. Like it was scaring, this kid to death, all this stuff happening and toys getting thrown around. I think maybe the kid maybe had been attacked at some point.
So the
So
family left and let you guys come in.
they wanted to stay, which
Oh,
I
okay.
understand that.
Yeah, okay.
Obviously we did want them to be there because that way they could tell us the areas that were the most troublesome, and I
Right.
also wanted to be able to speak with them if I had some sort of question about anything. So they were there and they observed what we did, and they stayed, and they were actually really cool. They were really cool about what went on there. And so we were there, I don't know, several hours and had nothing happen. We'd even set up some toys and things in the hallway, tried to pick up some things, and we didn't even get, usually on film, you'd at least get like a light ball, which I always consider to be dust, unless there was something happen that was um,
Orbs can
correlated.
be tricky. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the only way I would ever consider an orb to be something paranormal would be if the camera dropped battery really fast, the battery got drained, or the camera just shut down or something.
Right.
And we had that happen before in some of our investigations. So none of that really had happened. It's kind of dry, I was kind of getting bored, to be honest. And so I don't know, it was I want to say after midnight or so, the father came home, and uh, he was there, and he was like walking around. He just like comes in, starts walking around. He's telling us what's going on and stuff. And I'm in their bedroom, and we'd been doing, we'd set up a ghost box, which to the viewers that's maybe not aware of what a ghost box is, it's white noise on a AM radio station. And you have to set those up to um, you have to set that up so that it will not actually land on any station. It will continuously scan.
Do they
And
kind of randomly scan the AM
yes,
band? Is that
it
okay?
just scans the AM band, and if there's any paranormal activity and it can speak through that white noise, that's how they say, that it's supposed to work that way. And I was I'm going to say 50-50 on the ghost box thing before that night. So I always carried I had a pewter cross that I always kept with me, and I'd carry it around in my hand along with my camera and flashlight or whatever. So anyway, this guy comes in, he starts walking around, and just before that, over in the child's bedroom, we had this, I mean, it was like this demonic cackling sound come out of the ghost box. And I'm like, okay, that ain't even right. Like, you know, so I'm like, well, things are about to get crazy. I just had this gut feeling. I'm like, you know, here we go. And
I'm
so,
scared right now just hearing that.
yeah, and it started saying things like F Jesus, and
Oh
uh,
no.
that was only after prompting. One of the other investigators said, "Do you know the name of Jesus?" And it said, and I kid you not, replied, "F Jesus."
Wow.
And I mean, at that point, I was like, "Oh, this ain't good at all." And okay, this may be hard to believe. I may still have the picture somewhere. My pewter cross broke in my hand. Like, I didn't bend it; it broke. It just, I don't know if it's because it was pewter. Maybe it was one of those moments where I'm like, having too much of a,
No,
maybe it was just me.
I doubt it. The timing there's too.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. And it actually smelled terrible. Like, jewelry will, it's not clean silver jewelry and stuff. But this thing had a unearthly stink to it after that. Okay. So I kept it in like a little brass box for a long time after this. But anyway, that happened.
And pewter
And so,
crosses aren't that cheap. Pewter costs a little bit, right?
yeah, I mean, it was made well, I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought it was just gave out on me. So, um, it's not every day a metal cross just gives out on you. But
So real quick,
so,
did it bend or did it break?
oh, it broke.
Okay.
Yeah, it was like something, like you take a spoon and you bend it back and forth till it breaks. It was that sort of thing.
Gotcha.
Um, so this guy, he's like walking around in the hallway right after this. We're still tripping about the ghost box thing. Okay, so most of the investigators were in that room. I'm over in his bedroom and just taking pictures, after that happened. And he's like with his hands out. I don't know why he's doing this. And he's like talking to this thing. He's like, "I want you out of here right now." I'm like, "Man, listen to me. I'm going to be honest with you. Don't talk to me." He's like, I want it out of here now." And he got like kind of um, disheveled. I mean, he was like actually just fed up with this. And he didn't want to listen. And so he, without my advice, he went on about it. And I have the video proof. I can send it to you email. I will. This guy walks into that bedroom and falls face first. We thought he had a heart attack and died. I mean, flat face, hit the floor.
Wow.
And so now here's the other kind of a caveat to this. The other paranormal team were made up of mostly EMTs and stuff. They did this sort of as a hobby side thing. I did it as, it was kind of I made it more of a personal thing, vendetta for myself.
Hey, that's an awesome thing to have with you.
Yeah,
You know what I
and
mean?
they were like down there around him. I have the video footage and everything. But the photos that I was taking, when I got home and we analyzed, I did all my own analyzing and stuff. But there was one of those orbs. That was kind of my point. Was that whole night we didn't see orbs or anything. Like they had carpet and stuff, and you would usually expect to see a lot of that kind of stuff from dander and stuff like that floating up through there.
Dust.
Yeah, there was none of that. So the cameras were on point that night, and so he's out in the hallway talking, looking up at the ceiling, and there's this orb about the size of a dinner plate. Starts every shot that I'm taking, and I was using I believe it was with a Sony Cyber Shot, so it wasn't like a big nice DSL uh, camera, but it was decent, DSLR, is that right? Anyway, uh,
I'm
and
not a big camera guy, but I had a cyber shot.
yeah.
And you're right, it's a
and
good little camera.
hmm and I kept taking pictures, and every picture, every successive picture, this thing was getting closer to his head, and then it was like the size of a softball by the time it got to his forehead.
It was
And
getting
then
smaller as it.
yeah, and then he walked directly in that room and hit the floor on his face. And we thought the man had a heart attack from undue stress because he'd just gotten off work, and
So you
so
guys couldn't see this with the naked eye. It was caught on
no,
camera.
yes.
Okay.
And so I want to say the guy on that had came with me, one of my investigators, was rolling the camera. He started the camera up with night vision and stuff, because the lights were still out and everything. We kept everything off because we didn't like electronic interference. So I get down on the floor, and I have another cross with me, fortunately, and I put it on this man, and I start praying over him. And he's down for a few. They're checking his pulse, man. Uh, Everything, and finally, I like rubbed on his back and stuff. I'm like, man, are you gonna be okay? And then I started praying over him, and then he finally come back up out of it, and he's like, I don't know what happened. We got him to his knees there, and then we helped him up. He said, I don't know what happened, and he said, but I want out of here. He said, I'm out. I want to get out of this place. And I think one of the other investigators misunderstood that he was wanting it out of this place, but I think he said, I want out of this place. But so before we left, I blessed the house, and we did a big prayer session and left. And there was supposed to have been a follow up with them, but I never heard from the other group how that went. So, but that was probably one of the harder hit moments that I ever experienced.
Yeah, because one of your team members got temporarily disabled there, got taken out.
Well,
We're back then. Where did you come from on that? The way I look at it is, if you want to rebuke something, it's in the name of Jesus, and it's all coming from Jesus' power. You can't,
absolutely right.
say like you're the one doing it.
Yeah,
But you
I'm just asking God to through Jesus to
right.
bless the home and to help get rid of anything, because not everybody, there's this group out called Seether. They done a song called "Nobody's Praying for Me," and you know, I I like that song, even though it's sort of uh, unchristianly, I guess you. They're not exactly a Christian group, but I like this song
I'm
because
struggling with
because
that
I
because I play guitar
hmm
and I was saved in 2017 January,
hmm
and there's a lot of groups that I used to really like that. It's a struggle, and I still listen to some bands I
hmm
like, but yeah, I know what you're talking about there too.
yeah. I mean, for me, the music part doesn't really bother me. Like I still can listen to Marilyn Manson, Nine Inch Nails, all of them, and
Nine Inch
what I
Nails is really satanic.
yeah. Well, it isn't so much satanic as it is. I think it's a struggle with God. I
Well,
mean,
and mine is Black Sabbath. I can play like a lot of Black Sabbath on the
mhm.
guitar, and that's just I
Well,
believe an
sure, go ahead.
entity helped them write some of those songs. That's how you know what I'm saying. But I
Well,
still like to listen to them sometimes. Like I
sure,
said, it's a
sure.
struggle. But I know exactly what
Well,
you're talking about, man.
for each person, I think the conviction is what matters.
Yeah,
It's if you feel that it's not something you should do, then I think that's probably God telling you, man. It's not really good for you. And so, like for me, I don't feel that conviction listening to these bands like Tool and uh, these heavier bands and stuff. I can listen to that music, and it doesn't really affect me in a spiritual way, so to
yeah.
speak.
I was just wanting you to know I wasn't judging you. Like
Mm,
I do the same
sure,
thing,
sure.
but I can tell some of Black Sabbath's lyrics
Oh
were
yeah.
had biblical references in there that
hmm
I don't think the members had read the Bible. And there's some lyrics in there that it would sound like a fallen angel would have put
Help them
in
write
there.
it.
Yeah, and they also, Ozzy said a couple times, I believe, that he wasn't sure where his songs were coming from. So yeah,
Sure, and I've heard Black Sabbath, in a few interviews talk about that, how they sort of wrote the stuff as kind of like um, an homage to society, how evil it had become and stuff, and they sort of incorporated the the. I've heard them term it like horror into the music, to kind of like have that dark feel, and I'm like, well, maybe that was their intentions, but yeah, as you said, I think there's a lot more there than
yeah, like the song "Lord of This World." Uh,
hmm
I just don't think they had the biblical background
No, they
on
they were
on
being
some of
used as
that.
a tool, I believe.
Yes,
Again,
totally.
and then that's referencing another band, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, but uh, back to that song, "Nobody Praying for Me." There's a lot of people out there that feel nobody is praying for them or nobody cares. And that was my thing.
Hey, just to put this out there, if anybody needs to send me an email and you need prayer, I'll do it for you.
Hey, that's great, man. Yeah, that's awesome.
theabnormaltruth@gmail.com. You got some prayer right there. Go ahead.
Yeah, and same here. I pray on a wide scale.
I do
I
that too.
pray.
Do you pray over for your town and
I pray. Yeah, I pray for the world, man. Like
yes.
everyone,
Yes.
enemies. Even though I don't really have any, what I would call mortal enemies, I pray for my enemies. I pray for those that are,
Yeah,
like
that's the way to do it,
what's
right?
going on in America right now. The people that are starting trouble. I don't agree with what's happening, but I also pray for them as well.
A lot of them are young and don't know better.
Right, right. You know, they're confused and drawn into these subversive groups. I think that's why it's actually turned the way it has. But we'll get off that tangent quickly here. The thing I wanted to say is, you know, I listened to music and that song kind of rung out with me because you know I feel like I felt in my life like nobody cared, no one was praying for me.
You were
But
identifying.
yeah, I identified with that song somewhat, and so that was my point about that home there. You know, I felt like maybe those people never had anybody pray for them, you know, or pray over their home, and so you know they were open to the idea, and so I did that and I felt like that was the right thing to do. And so, you know, if you are out there and you're into the paranormal, let me at least give you this one piece of advice. Make sure that you are spiritually sound with God before you do these things and converse with him on whether it's the right thing to do even because I came to a point where I felt as though it was the wrong thing for me to be out chasing after things that I didn't have control over. You know, that's, you know, there is a certain protection God can give you, but I think it's not wise to test how strong, you know, your faith is with these things because, um,
I
you could be
100%.
taking
Yeah.
your whole household into your hands. You know, your one of your family gets demonically oppressed or something of that nature. And I mean, do you really want to live with that? You know, that's something to think about. So, but on that note, um, that person I was talking about, the paranormal team that's still on, I think, still on TV and still doing paranormal research. The one place that I have seen, and I mean, I looked at that place with a sense of dread, is the Heller House. Have you heard of it?
Um,
Hellier? Is it Hellier? Hellier?
describe it because I was never the biggest. It's weird. The word paranormal to me used to mean it's beyond normal, but now the ghost hunters have kind of taken that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I've looked into everything. I've seen ghosts. I've heard a lot of ghost stories and stuff. But if you describe it more, I might not just remember the name.
Um, let me look real quick here. If you want to talk to your viewers, let me see if I can find. I just want to give the right name of this.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to say I always just feel I don't know how I would put it, but I feel just sad that people would go out and look for that. It's a very dangerous thing to do, and like Brandon said, you better have a relationship with Christ, and I don't even know if you should be doing that after that. But then again, there is that element of some of those investigators are helping the family. But you do have those investigators that are not founded in Christ because Christ is the only thing that will defend the family or anybody from. They're scared of Christ, and um, you have a lot of researchers that actually make things worse after they leave, and so you've got to take all of those things into account before going into people's homes and investigating. It's a serious thing that not only affects you but could affect your family. And if you're investigating a house with a family currently living in there having problems, it can affect them too. So I would be a real spiritual warrior before I started, you know, doing those sorts of things.
Okay, I think I found it. It's um, it's in a house in Gary, Indiana. Um, I was thinking it was up in like Detroit, Michigan, or around Michigan, but apparently it's just called Demon House.
Gary, Indiana has a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, this house, I remember seeing it. I'll say his name. It was Zach Baggins. I'm not a big fan
Okay.
of his.
I even know who that is, although I don't know all of them.
Right.
I know who you're talking about.
I'm not a huge fan of his because I think there's a lot of hoax stuff going on. That's not to, down him or anything,
Yeah,
but
I
I
didn't
believe
really
there's a
have.
lot of
Yeah.
overly produced things and stuff in the show.
Yes.
So, and that's not to say they haven't had real things happen, but you know,
I think it's
um,
the nature of the beast, you know.
well, yeah, and funny you say it that way, but yeah.
I meant to say it that way, but go ahead.
hmm So yeah, excuse me. Anyway, that house, when I first saw it, man, I was like, even through watching it via the internet, I mean, I just had this terrible feeling down inside. You know what I mean? It's just like some places you see, and it's just like, wow, that something's wrong with that place. And I definitely believe that house, there's something wrong. If people want to look into it online, you can find out a little about it and probably even watch the episodes online. I think they're on YouTube, of uh, them investigating that place. And if I'm not mistaken, he had something happen to his eyesight while he was investigating that house.
Do you know the general background to that place? Like why it was haunted? Like what or
I really don't. It's been probably a year or so since I actually watched that, and there was another house as well. Someone else. It's a little lesser known place, but it is built like a cross. This house is built like a cross, and there have been like suicides and that sort of thing in that house. And I mean, I've actually saw they did some live streaming, um, with just cameras set up inside, and they had some pretty weird paranormal things happen in that house. And
I bet
a lot
they
of
had
people were like,
some.
"Oh, that was fake," and I'm like, from my point of view, as much footage as I've watched of real things that's happened, I would say that's at least a 90% chance that was real.
I feel like without even knowing anything, I just feel like there's been some rituals done in that house. I don't know. It just seems like
Right.
previous
hmm
owners or something. But anyway,
Sure.
yeah.
It's very likely. And we had one house that had that happen, that there had been some people dabbling in. And that was very close to where I live at, as a matter of fact. And the house has been since torn down, and thankfully so. But it
I
was,
I
yeah,
believe
go
that
ahead.
is well. It's really more widespread and in small towns even. Uh, these occult groups.
It is, you know, there's a lot of people I, that I know don't really believe about these. Um, I hope when I say this, I'm not overstepping. The child sex slavery rings and the SRA stuff that's happening
Mm,
around the country, that's been
yeah,
going on for many years.
I've talked to a lot of SRA victims, and I listened to a lot of accounts of that, and a lot of Christians and churches will not ever speak of it, and they don't even believe that it goes on. Totally oblivious.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it was sort of hoaxy back in the 80s. There was a
I
big
Yeah, I
craze of
believe.
that, but
No,
it
I
really does
believe.
happen.
No, I believe the media poo-pooed all that, and all that was actually going down. I've looked into that. I want to say McMartin. Wasn't
Yeah,
that it
yeah,
was
that was
the
one of them.
like the
And
preschool or
then
something?
Johnny Gosh was one of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. I believe
Uh,
all that stuff was actually going down, and they got away with it. That's
yeah,
my take from my
yeah,
little bit of
Johnny
research.
Gosh was a real thing that happened, and that boy never was found.
Right.
Um, so I've seen some interviews with the SRA victims, and you can tell. Um, I've studied a lot of different areas of parapsychology and even how to be able to tell from people's body language a lot of times if they're lying,
Yeah.
and that takes quite a lot of time to learn that. But it's really interesting to learn that the microaggressions and things that people show.
Well,
Um,
I used to moderate this voice chat room in the early 2000s for about 3 or 4 years, and people that saw UFOs and were abductees would come in,
mhm.
and I got good at it just from all the hundreds of people I talked to.
You could
And
tell whether they were
yeah,
just
and it may
giving.
be a part of being slightly empathic too. Just
Yeah, it gives you a little edge. I
yeah,
mean, in order to kind of see where you kind of can feel mannerisms and things people say makes a lot of times it makes a big difference that way. But for me, the uh, the microaggressions give people away. If you can actually see someone speak,
right.
you're going to see things that are like, wow. It's like, did they really just lie that hard in front of a camera? It's like, and especially about something of that nature. I mean, that's just like, to me, that's a forbidden thing to go that route. It's like to
Yeah,
lie on that extent, about something that serious.
and like, I was thinking about it before I started doing these interviews. There's probably going to be a little disclaimer in front of the video saying, I've tried to vet everyone, but it's impossible to vet everybody 100%, and people are just going to have to make up their minds on whether or
Right,
not they
right.
believe, I guess. And I don't have 1 ounce of doubt on what everything you've just told me tonight. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
my
and
opinion.
I know it's a lot to take. I mean, I have
Not for
had a
me. Not for
very
me.
vivid life. It's for me. Some days it's one of those things where the best I can do is kind of laugh about it. Like, have I really?
You
you know,
have to
I'm
sometimes.
the
Just
I'm the guy that saw Bigfoot,
mm,
Goatman, and had paranormal experiences that is just mind blowing. Like
well,
just
real
to name.
quickly, because we're coming
Mhm.
up towards
Sure,
two
I'm
hours,
sorry.
which is awesome. I love to have. This is why I want to do this. It's basically I just want to talk to people. But do you know at what point you actually became a Christian? Like, did something happen to you? Do you want to talk about that at all? A little bit of your testimony? Because I always think
Oh,
that's an
sure.
awesome thing to hear, and I'm probably going to give mine at some point.
Absolutely. Yeah. In around about 2001 or so, I had, you know, this was, you know, the whole 9/11 thing happened and all that. And it really caused a lot of mental distress on me, as I'm sure it did most people living in that time period. Um, but just after that, the whole wars and everything started breaking out and all that. And even with that, I wasn't really struck that much by the wars or anything. And so, I think the pivotal moment for me is I had a friend that I worked with at the factory that I was working in. We started riding to work together doing rideshare, and he came from a Christian home, and his father was a actual preacher. And we started talking, and I found out that he had basically put his Bible under the bed. He was done with Christianity because of a bad marriage that had happened to him. I mean, he just, it was like a dark time in his life before he started working at the place we were working. And so I had all these questions. And so we would have these long talks, because where we worked at was like an hour and a half drive. So each way we had a good time to be able to talk about the stuff. And The odd thing is, I helped bring him back to Christ from having, all this animosity towards God. Him seeing my fervor and wanting to find out about God, because I mean, I just had this feeling of, man, I was damned, like there was this over. I can't really tell you what set it off. I just, I'd had all these dreams. I think we mentioned that in the pre-show thing.
Yeah.
That I'd had all these dreams about the end of the world and things like that, but I wasn't raised as a Christian. Obviously, I had seen things about Revelation and that sort of thing, but none of it had really stuck with me. So I felt like that maybe God was trying to tell me something, and it just kept weighing on me. And so he helped me understand the Bible, and in doing so, I helped him back to Christ, and he helped me to Christ for the first time.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, I had actually been involved in a church, and they weren't teaching salvation properly, and
Uh,
and it was really hard for me to see past it. Like, me and him actually had some arguments over it, and I was like, the thing was, I wasn't actually arguing with him; I was arguing with Scripture.
yeah.
And there's a lot of people may disagree with me. You as well may, and that's fine. I mean, I don't look down on anyone for that. I'm not going to sit here and say, "Well, you're going to hell
Right.
because you don't believe the way I do."
Well, I'd have to
I don't
say
think that way. It's not how that's not how
the
God made
way
me.
I've always looked at it is Christians shouldn't argue over anything, but salvation is one of
It's
those
critical.
things. It is. That's the most important thing. I don't see how it gets misconstrued, but it does. And if you really
Yes.
care about somebody, you want them to really get it. And I would
Well,
just like to say my stance is by faith alone, and not by faith and works, and not by faith in yourself. It's
right.
it's it's all him. But go ahead.
Well, the the belief that I have through Scripture, and this is going by um, all of New Testament, which, if most of your listeners out there have not ever known about the Bible, everything except the Gospels are letters to certain people. So when you read the Bible, what you have to understand is, who is it written to? What is the point behind it? And was it for that time or later? So that's how you rightly divide the word. But let me, if you don't mind, can I read a short scripture?
Sure, go ahead.
It's out of First Peter 3. It's First Peter 3:17 through 21. And the scripture goes as this. I use New American Standard Bible. It reads really easily for me. So it it says, "For it is better if God should will it so that you suffer for doing what is right rather than for doing what is wrong. For Christ also died for our sins once and for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison," meaning in Hades, "who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is, 8 persons, were saved. Were brought through safely through the water. Corresponding to that, baptism now saves you, not the removal of the dirt of the flesh, but the appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ." And that verse is overlooked by so many people. They can't believe that baptism is as important as it is, because Well, first of all, that would knock out all of your televangelists.
Right.
They don't preach baptism. And I found out where that started from, the preaching of using only Romans 10:9, which is, confess by mouth and you will be saved.
Right.
You have to understand that that was Paul talking to the church, which had already been baptized into Christ,
Right.
that had fell back into their sins. That's what Romans 6 was about. He was rebuking them back to the church. And so Romans 10 is him once again rebuking them. If you confess by mouth that Jesus is Lord, the Christ, you will be saved. And some people have cherry picked that and they've used it as their own doctrine. And let me tell you, the devil is in every church in America.
Yeah.
He's just waiting. He's waiting to deceive us all. And I mean, it's that serious. Your soul, there's a fight for your soul every moment of the day. And
There's a spiritual war going on everywhere.
absolutely. And I mean, as far as testimonies go, I had never felt saved. Like I had went through all the motions. I'd shaken the preacher's hand. I'd done, the little prayer and all this stuff, and I never felt saved. Something was wrong, and that's what started the conversation with my friend. And finally, it was actually on Good Friday of 2003, I was baptized into Christ, and I'm telling you, it was like I sat down a bag of bricks before the cross. And prior to that, you asked the question, was there something led me to that moment? Well, I'd had a dream about 3 weeks before that. And I was in this dark place and Christ was on the cross. And I couldn't see his face. I just knew it was him because he was on a cross. And his toes were like at like eye level. And I saw this long, muddy road behind him. And it was like knee deep mud. It was just crazy, and it took me several weeks to figure out what the dream was about. And what I came to the conclusion is that God was telling me the road to follow Christ was going to be long and hard. And it has been, I'm 41 now, and it's been an up and down battle. I've had to battle everything. I've battled the bottle. I've battled, uh, the cursing thing, I mean, it's
Well, a
just,
lot of people don't know. Most of us go through some trials by fire after being saved. Those
sure
are,
enough.
you get tested, and entities don't want that to happen, so they tempt you and test you and bother you and oppress you probably more than any other time.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's not like, well, you get saved and your troubles go away, as some televangelist might have you believe it.
Yeah,
But
what's really sad is I do not attend a church, and I've been saved for a little over 3 years now, maybe 3.5 years,
mhm.
and it's just because I know that I don't know of a church within driving distance of me that I would be happy with. You know what I'm saying?
Well, sure. Yeah. And I go through the same struggle. That's sort of my problem right now. There's a lot of churches
And I
where I
want the
live.
fellowship. I want the
Yeah.
fellowship. I
I
really
understand that.
do. I want my
Hmm.
daughter to experience it, but I almost wish I could find some house church somebody is having, because I don't believe most of them are feeding the people meat. It's only milk or
And that's how it's supposed to
prosperity.
be. Hmm.
Yeah, that's basically what they did, right, at the beginning.
Yeah. They went from home to home, and, obviously we can't sell all of our belongings. No one's really willing to do that. But of course, in that time period, you're looking at a whole different system.
Well,
They had,
also, if I knew Jesus, I would have done it. If
right.
you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
If
I
he was
mean,
there, man. Whew,
in their time period, man, you're talking serious poverty
yeah,
and that sort of thing. And it was mainly the thing to sell all your belongings and make sure that no one in the church was without. Well, that was the main point. They would have had to sold everything they had to help each other out because, they really didn't have much to begin with.
Well, now a
So,
lot of churches have big money in the bank.
right.
You know.
And that leads to some problems and I'm not judging the churches. I'm saying it doesn't seem right for me. I don't
Yeah.
feel the love. I feel there's this universal religion moving into so many of them, and the universalist style of religion is very dangerous to Christianity itself. You start going down the road of evangelical and all these things. Um, I don't align myself to any other church than just say I don't even. I wouldn't say I have a denomination, but I guess if you wanted to put a tag on it, I would say Church of Christ or Christian fundamental church.
Yeah, I don't call myself religious at all because I get that distinction. I'm just a
Yeah,
Christian.
no, I don't have that at all. I think there's Catholics and stuff that are looking for things. They're looking for the right path. I think a lot of them are disillusioned,
Don't get me
and I don't.
started on that
Yeah,
one.
right.
I think you should run from that if you're in that. That is
Sure.
just the worst.
But I have known some Catholics that really do seek the truth. It's just hard to get away from it, because they were brought up in that sort of
Well, I've
that
talked
light
to
of.
so many people that were in that specific denomination that it made them run from
Oh yes,
Christ.
yeah, yeah,
I
I agree
mean,
with you. Yeah, I've met those as well, man. It's a mixed bag,
yeah,
and
there's some dark things behind that whole. Yeah.
I actually have met one true Jesuit in my lifetime. We were talking about Freemasonry. I actually met one true Jesuit. Uh, I won't go into it, but I met one, and it was a very uncomfortable uh, couple hours that I was in the presence of this guy. And
Wow.
they are sort of, if you've ever read the Jesuit Oath, it's really
I haven't.
scary. It's scary.
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of really understand what they were. And I guess the
They are the black
shortcut,
nobility of Catholicism,
right. And like a
and
black army almost.
yeah, I mean they're the
The Masons of the Catholics.
their hands is in everything,
Yeah.
and I mean it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
And they're one of their parts of their oath is you know willing to dash a baby against a wall and kill it. And I mean, you can look it up online. The
Wow.
Jesuit oath. You know, I
Yeah.
suggest that for anyone that's like, wanting to know who these people are, and if they know one, I wouldn't confront them unless you are spiritually sound and you are probably armed. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, I wouldn't advise that. But
Yeah, they can make your life pretty
I
terrible.
might
And
look into that oath and I might not.
yeah, I mean,
You
it's worth
know?
looking at just to see what they're actually about. But that
Yeah.
is, it's mind blowing that anyone could use the name of Christ alongside
Hmm. Well,
dashing a child, an infant, against the wall.
what could possibly be behind that? You
Yeah,
know what I'm
there you go.
saying? I mean, just think about it. Oh, that is, yeah, I've never heard that before. That's,
And that's the thing. One other point there, and I'll shut up and let you give your testimony there, sir. Uh,
well, I'm probably not going to do that at night, but I give the short of it.
okay. But yeah, one other thing there to extrapolate about that sort of stuff. I don't think people understand either the very essence of the darkness that actually surrounds us as human beings. And I mean, it leads right back to the very point of the story when about the Goatman. I think it led me in a certain direction. And at some point, God seen that I was heading in a direction that maybe I couldn't come back from. I don't know. But I will tell you that there are things that are as real as we are right now having this conversation. And that if you feel something deep down that God's trying to tell you, there's a faint voice inside you. Sometimes you think it's your own voice, but sometimes it's God talking to you. And he's telling you to get away from something, and if you feel it, a lot of times you're going to save yourself a whole lot of backtracking if you just, get away from whatever situation you're in. If it's you're a person that drinks, I'm not telling you that you can't have a drink, but I'm telling you, if you allow yourself to become a drunkard, find yourself at the bottom of a bottle every time you turn around, it's going to be hard to come back out of that bottle, and if God tells you don't do it and you keep going, it's those hard lessons that you never forget. Let me tell you, that's a quote of my mother. She said, the hardest lessons you'll ever learn are the ones that uh, I'm sorry, self-taught lessons are the ones you never forget. There you go.
Yeah. I do believe Jesus does help us out
Yes,
and save us
absolutely.
from death and all kinds of things. I think he can see it all, and I've heard some amazing testimonies about exactly that.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I
So,
mean,
yeah, listen, have ears, you know.
yep. Yeah, this has been amazing, man. I'm really thrilled that you had me on.
This has
And
been very insightful and a great experience for me too. I'm so glad you emailed me, and I appreciate you coming on and telling your life story. This is exactly the first kind of encounter video and that I wanted to do. So I'm thrilled you got a hold of me.
yeah, I was kind of drawn to you, man. When I saw that, I was subscribed to you already, and I saw your video from was it last night that you put that out or
Yeah,
yesterday?
yeah.
And I was like, man, I feel compelled to tell him about this. It's like, I've actually wanted to tell someone, and see how it went. But
Well, I'll tell you my really my agenda here is I've always asked people around me, about the strange things that's happened to them,
mhm.
and I really would just love to have people email me and tell me their stories, and if they want to come on and tell it, I've always thought that that would be really cool,
It is.
you
It's
know,
really a good. I think that's a cool idea. I mean,
and I could learn and I could maybe tell some people what I think that happened to them, and it's something that's been put on me to do. I kind of stopped making videos for a while, and
hmm.
I got saved like in the middle of my channel. You can
Oh,
probably
I see.
tell by looking at because I
That
didn't
that
even
must be why I hadn't really seen much from you there for like
the
I don't know
last
why. Like some people's feed doesn't come up in my
yeah,
videos as often,
right, but
and it was really strange. I hadn't seen anything from you in a long time on my feed, and all of a sudden it popped up, and I was like, I'm gonna check this out. I was tired of looking at all the riots and things.
yeah, people need a break from that definitely.
Yeah, we need to be human, even in human times. It seems like, I mean, humanity has really taken a turn, and I think what we've talked about tonight is actually, if you think about 40 years, or 41 years, um, I'm only 41. In a lot of people's eyes, hey, he's getting old. He's getting some age on him. But the thing is, I feel like I've lived 70 years. Like easily.
Yeah,
And we're you know, you've had experiences, I've had experiences, and no doubt your listeners have as well. And I think the things that we're watching now on television is this apex, this conglomeration of all the bad of the world is happening at this point. And there are hidden hands that are making this happen. I mean, you have to look at the timing, look at
It's
the
the
groups.
beginning of the B system, man. That's what I'm
Yeah, I
getting from
mean,
it.
I really, I don't know. I hate to try to, you know, go off into that realm of it, you know, because you got to understand, like, my spiritual beliefs. I'm still learning. I still consider myself a babe in Christ. You know, even as long as I've been saved, I'm still learning because, like, every time I turn around, it's like a back start relearning again. You know, because you do that. You backstep, you backtrack. It happens to all of us. You know, that's why I said no Christian, you know, is infallible. So, you know, that's the whole thing. That's the reason we need Jesus and we need God so badly.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point. None of us
Exactly.
would make it without him. And
Absolutely.
some
You know,
people almost teach that you have to be infallible and they never reach it, so they give
mm,
up. And that's some
yeah,
bad
it's
teaching.
this whole like Pharisaical type thought that's being pushed on people. Like, we need to walk around with our hands together in prayer all hours of the day and night. And you know, like, my relationship with God is I'll talk to God through the day in my mind. You know, it's like me and him's having conversations. Like, I'm like, what do you think about this, God? You know, it's like, does isn't this kind of what you were showing us? You know, and that sort of thing. You know, I can't explain it to where it probably sounds
No, I do
even
that too.
remotely,
It's called
you know,
having a relationship with
right,
Christ.
without
And
religion.
right, and that's where you need to be. It's not
Sure.
just about going to a building.
Yes, that is absolutely right. There's churches all over this country with the word church on the outside, but it doesn't mean they're actually telling you what they need to tell you to get you to heaven. You know, that's the thing. That's the common denominator. That's why I said the devil is in every church, and especially those. You know, if you go back in history, used to a church building was called a meeting house because we are the church. And when we go there, that's a meeting place for the church.
When two or
And so
more
now
gather.
it's like it's double speak, man.
Mhm.
That's the evil of it. It's been turned around. The devil likes to turn everything upside down. And if you ever want to have a conspiracy show, believe me, sir, I can give you 2 hours or more of that as well.
Yeah, well, we might have you back on because I could
Yeah.
talk about
Uh,
that all day long too. It's a very important topic also.
yeah, I'm very versed in targeted individuals.
Mhm.
You know, anything from 5G, the vaccines, the silent weapons for silent wars. What's
Yeah.
happened in California with the
Yeah.
wildfires? You name it, man. I mean, and we can go any direction you want to go. So if
Awesome.
you ever want to have me back on, and your viewers don't hate me for rattling my Kentucky accent for 2 hours, then
Oh, that's not gonna happen. This show is for people that have still have an attention span.
yeah, got you,
And
got you.
I like to listen to hour longer videos. Most videos I watch and the channels I do watch.
Wait, wait,
Uh,
wait. This is not going to be on TikTok.
no. It's amazing I know what TikTok is.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I'm in the same boat, my friend.
yeah.
But
So I
yeah,
mean that's just the way I have to put it out. This is for people that may like to lay down and just listen to something or do something else. They
Sure,
don't necessarily have to watch it. They can just
well, I
listen.
used to be a huge fan of Coast to Coast AM.
Me too,
Uh,
and I can't stand to listen to
I
it
can't.
anymore.
It's got
Mhm.
so into this new age mantra. I just
Yes.
can't. I can't do it anymore.
What
It's like
has not been taken over, you know?
I don't know anymore. It's like used to. I got this X Files feeling when Coast to Coast AM would come on. I'd be like,
Mhm.
ooh, it's gonna be David Pallades and missing 411, and then
Hey,
it
that
turns in.
guy's interesting, you know?
Man, I have more interviews than I care to mention of stuff that he's.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this about the guy because it's kind of an ad hominem attack, but George Snorri is terrible for that show. To me,
Yeah.
George Knapp makes you feel like you're in a real radio show. He's got
Right.
that voice. He's like, you know, from my hometown of sex,
You
sin,
know,
and it's horrible, but
I met George Norrie when I was managing these tech shops in the airport. I actually met him.
wow. Was he a pretty nice guy or?
Yeah, yeah, he was looking for a certain kind of cell phone case
Mm,
and for like an X or something, and I knew we didn't have it because I was the one doing all the ordering. And I
sure,
and
sure.
I must have sounded weird because I was like, I know this guy, and I just was like, no, we don't have that case. And he had kind of a puzzled look on his face, like you're not even going to look. And I was like, well, I order all the case, I can't carry every single case for it. But
Sure.
after he talked a little more, I was like, oh, you're George Norrie, wow. And now I
Yeah,
can't stand to listen to
yeah.
it. There's a Oh, it's, I'm sorry, but
He sort of goes with every wind. It's like I've heard him talk to people that are Christians or at least remotely Christian based, and he'll like he sort of you know works things over with them, and then there's the whole he takes it over to the new age, and he
mhm.
has I know he has to have a diverse selection on there with the psychics and all that. They do that every year. The psychic, what is it? Predictions for the coming year and all that. But
Well,
I mean,
if you're an
I always
author
liked that.
yeah,
The show was awesome. It used to be.
if you're an author or something like that, then it's a big deal to go on that show.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're going to
And
be selling tons of books.
yeah, and you'll bend over backwards, keep going on there,
I
sadly.
always like to listen to Tom Horn. I
Yeah.
mean, even though I don't align myself necessarily with his views, I really like to listen to Tom Horn, and it was really sad that he lost his partner that wrote with him, Chris. I can't remember his name now, but he lost him. I think this past, maybe the year before last,
Right.
or maybe even this past year. And yeah, I always like to listen to Tom Horn, and but they get into the gematria and into the astrology stuff, man, and we're told to stay away from that kind of
We
thing.
are. It's
Now, on a the caveat to that is there are signs in the sun, moon, and stars. I don't deny that aspect. But when
well,
you
that's what
start
God says they're for.
right, exactly. But when you go basing, like you're going to be able to predict something off of them, that's I think where people run themselves into trouble.
Right.
That's kind of that forbidden thing that we just shouldn't be playing with.
Yeah, I had to kick the astrology habit. It never was bad, but I'd go take it every once in a while, and I just don't do it at all
Well, I
because
mean, it's so
that's.
broad swathing. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
so you're an introvert, but you also don't like to, or you like to
yeah,
be around people. And I'm
but
like,
but
really?
then if they get you a couple of days, you're
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh wow, it.
Hmm.
But that's not where to look.
No,
You get a
no.
relationship with him. and try to listen to him, and he'll steer you in the right direction.
Well, I know you can do editing and things, but I wanted to throw this out here real quick. If you don't want me to use this, but I know most people saw the landing or the takeoff of SpaceX,
Right? Yeah.
with Elon and stuff. Did no one find it odd that the video feed cut whenever the rocket supposedly landed
They
back on
always do.
the drone ship?
They always do.
I mean, I was like, well, isn't that perfect timing?
The
And then as soon as it cuts back, all the smoke is gone. It doesn't dissipate that quickly from a rocket.
car in space. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me? Are you
yeah, yeah,
kidding me?
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I'm not necessarily a flat earther. I don't know. I don't know what to think about the earth. All I know is it doesn't pertain to my salvation. And I would also recommend that to your listeners is it doesn't it doesn't matter what your view is, because
well,
either
more,
way it doesn't affect salvation.
more and
Salvation is all.
more, I become skeptical what
Sure.
actually space is.
Yeah, I am as well, but
And if
it's
you
kind
looking
of
at
a.
it in the Bible, does it really say? You know, it's definitely something I've looked in. We'll put it that way, and
Mhm.
that's not out of the realm of possibility. And that, if they actually did change the perception of that 500 years ago, that would have. If we knew, just say for instance, that the Earth is flat, there's maybe some kind of dome around it, and we are the center of the universe, so
Mhm.
to speak, that would lead a lot of people to God, knowing that we're in this enclosed world, even if it's not enclosed. Who knows? But
Yeah, that's
uh,
really an interesting take. I hadn't really
yeah.
thought of that. I mean,
Well,
you're right. That
instead, we think that we're insignificant speck of dust
sure
and
lowers
in
the
a
the esteem of people.
happenstance. Yeah, in a happenstance, we're far away from God. But if the world was flat and God is on the top of it, his throne is, and looking down, that's much more personable, and it's that's this is a whole different ball game. So
You
I don't
know,
leave that out of the realm of possibility at all.
right? And like with Operation Paperclip, and I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to shut up soon here, I promise. But to kind of give a little taste with Operation Paperclip, when NASA was first formed in like 1956 or whatever, and they brought the Nazi scientists over here from Germany, and Werner von Braun, he even said himself that they would need a rocket ship nearly the size of the, I think it was the Empire State Building in
All
order to get
right.
into space,
Yeah.
actual space. And that was just from their calculations, which were medieval as to what we probably have now as far as technology, obviously. And, you know, uh,
There's a
man, there's
hundred
just so
thousand.
many things. Yeah, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
there's a thousands of things to tell me that that's probably didn't happen. I was in Tampa one morning. I had to go. I was working at the airport there, and I had to go in real early. I worked like 12-hour days, and so I'd get there before the sun went up, and I would leave when the sun went down. And I saw a launch, and we're getting on this tram to go to my airside, and you could see it was launching. Even people on the tram said, "Yeah, there's a launch this morning." But that thing had such a curve to it. There's no way that was going into space. I was
Yeah, I mean,
I
that's
was
the
even
same
to
with
the point.
SpaceX the other day. It was
Yeah,
unreal.
I mean
I
it
was
goes
like,
straight
what?
up for a while, but I was actually concerned back then. Maybe 2000. 9,
Hmm.
the thing
It
had
was going down.
malfunctioned. Yeah,
Yeah,
because I realize that they are supposedly go at some angle. They don't just go straight up. I get that. You can't
yeah,
supposedly just break through going straight up. But this thing was going downward as far as my view was.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, and we'll end it at this, but the platform we're on here really squashed that. None of that even comes up on any of my feeds anymore at
Yeah,
all.
you're right. You're right.
And if
Yeah,
you go looking
everything.
for it, you get the opposing view. If you
Sure,
actually type
sure.
that in, you get the opposing view. So that
Hmm.
should tell you something. I believe we should be able to talk about purple, pink elephants that fly if you want to.
Absolutely.
Uh,
And this platform and what you're doing right now is, I think this could actually take off for you, man. I mean, this is,
well,
I mean,
unfortunately, I think we might have a limited time to do this sort of thing, and so I got some sense of urgency to do what I needed to do while I still can.
sure. And
And I'm staying away from politics
yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff like
that's
that.
fruitless.
Yeah, it's hard to sometimes, but I'm not really political anyway, but I
I'm
don't
sort
believe
of a
in any of it.
constitutionalist
Yeah,
myself.
but
If
I don't believe in
that's
a left and a right. I think at
no,
this point
no.
it's all a show and
It's
it's
them and it's
ridiculous.
us.
Yes. And I
Yeah,
mean, so, but
yeah,
yeah, I hope it does. And I hope people send in their stories and want to be on the show because this is my dream to be able to talk to more people than I just actually meet out in the world. And
sure.
just as a tip for people, I found that the phrase, "What is the strangest thing you've ever seen?" I think that is the best way. And as a salesman, you just learn what phrases work on the general people.
You
And that
hooked me,
is,
man.
yeah, that's such a good way to bring it up because you don't want to go, "Hey, you ever seen a dog man?" To the average person. But you can get a lot of and I even my grandfather told me a story, and that's the phrase I used on it because he just did not seem like he would have had. Guess I was just fishing.
Hmm.
I said, "What's the strangest thing you've ever seen?" Or if have you ever had anything strange happen to you? And that's a good way, folks, to get something out of somebody. It's so broad and general that a lot of people have had something unexplainable happen to them.
Loaded question.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just wanted to put that out there. That's my favorite thing to do. But to be
yeah. I
able
mean,
to,
you're an awesome host, man. I mean, like, I mean, you're cordial, man, and you relate, and I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better place for me to ever put this out to anybody. Uh, I, man, I would love to be able to talk to you more often. I mean, if you would, care to have me on
totally.
sometimes,
Yeah, let's do
I
that.
would, I would, I would love to wax eloquent with you, my friend. We could talk about some serious stuff going on in this world, and we'll dive into some of them dark realms,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we can
Well,
shed light on them for people.
some people may be of the opinion you shouldn't do that, but you shouldn't have your head in the sand. You need to know your enemy.
Absolutely,
You need to know your enemy,
absolutely.
guys. You need to know what's up.
Yeah, you can't go out and go blindfolded against a
No,
ninja, and these ninjas are coming, and they're
especially with
they're
your head in the sand, like a lot of people are. And hey, I've got some hope, man. I see a lot of people waking up in one way or the other.
and that's a beautiful thing,
It
and
is. It gives
hopefully
me
it
hope.
happens. It happens at a very rapid pace at the pace the world is going. So,
I
if we
believe
could,
the wheat and the tares are both
mhm.
growing in their traits.
The winnowing fork is working its way right now. I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
I can feel it. And
Um,
it does give me hope that I see random people and all of a sudden, hey, I just see a lot of people waking up, although most of them are asleep. There's still a lot of people rapidly seeing
Yeah, I
what's
mean,
going on.
I've come from a very dark past, and if I could come through it, man, I'm going to tell you now, I'm probably as weak among men as any as far as the temptations of this life. But if God can see fit to save someone like me, then He can save anyone. I
I
mean,
feel the same
literally,
way. Yeah, and
you know.
I've shed a lot of sins, but I'm still shedding them.
And
You know
you
what I
will
mean?
to
Mhm.
the day they call in the time on you, my friend. You
Yeah.
will have sin. It's that unfortunate facts that we have to deal with.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah,
Well, look, I guess we better go. It's pretty
sure,
late. I
sure,
might have to do this in two parts. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet, but I may split it
sure
up into
thing,
a
man.
couple
Yeah.
there. But
Are we
uh,
like? Can you just cut this part?
yeah, yeah, we'll
Okay,
go
okay.
ahead and end it here, guys. If you like what you heard, you want other people to hear it, like and subscribe and all that good junk. And I'll be having more shows on if you want to tell me your story, and that's whether or not you want to be on the show or not. You can always email me at theabnormaltruth@gmail.com. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for having me on.